Hi, everybody. This is David Rosenboom speaking to you from my home studio in Valencia, California on January 15th, 2018, near CalArts, where I have worked since 1990. Well, this is a nice opportunity to share a few tidbits of my rich experience hanging around the legendary Bleecker Street studio and the scene around the Electric Circus in the late 1960s. I was still at the University of Illinois in the summer of 1967 when the phone rang and someone said, "Hi, this is Lucas Foss," and he offered me a position at the State University of New York in Buffalo in the Center for Creative and Performing Arts, which I immediately accepted. I went up there, and before I left, my close friend, ally, colleague, mentor, Sal Martirano said, "You got to meet Morton Subotnick." So I got there, and lo and behold, in the fall of '67, Mort showed up for a performance of one of his pieces with the Buffalo Philharmonic, I believe. In the scene surrounding that, I was able to walk up to him and introduce myself, and we have been friends ever since. I was in Buffalo during that '67-'68 year, but made many trips to New York for performances and other things, and came to visit the Bleecker Street studio on Mort's invitation. I could see right away that it was quite a hotbed of creative activity, invention, new things, concept building, and all sorts of great stuff. Later in the spring of '68, I moved to New York around the time that we made the first famous recording of Terry Riley's In C for Columbia Records. And I stayed and was welcomed by Mort and friends into the Bleecker Street environment. I had a great time there, met lots of people. It was quite a scene. People were coming through all the time, sometimes sleeping on the floor, sometimes wandering through just to see what was going on or to see all this new great activity. Met lots of people there, met Don Buchla there for the first time. All kinds of people wandered through. Ultraviolet showed up every once in a while. I met Serge Cherepnin there. That was particularly interesting. We had lots of deep talks about electronic music instrument design. I think Serge had just come from Darmstadt, and he was taking the RCA correspondence course in electronic circuit design and starting to get ready to build stuff. And we talked philosophy a lot. I was building instruments that time as well, and my attitude was bring every connection point around a generalized circuit like an op-amp to the front panel and let musicians decide how to customize it to make it do what they wanted. On the other end of the scale, not completely the far end of the scale, but the other end was Don Buchla, who brought a lot of wonderful connection points to the panels, but made them accessible and did it in a way that made sense in the arena of composition, electronic composition, and creation and performance. Serge landed somewhere in the middle with his wonderful instruments that he later developed after he'd moved to California. The scene was really exciting. Tony Martin was a key, too. Tony was developing a lot of interactive work, light art, multimedia systems that were ahead of their time, I would say. Through Mort and Tony and Ted Koons, who I like to call a professional catalyst, he was working at NYU, and he loved to put people together who may have never worked together before to see what might happen, and often it was really quite extraordinary. In any case, somehow in this soup of creativity, I got involved with the Electric Circus and eventually took a job there as an artistic coordinator, I think was my title, and I helped produce many shows of all kinds. On Mondays, we were given access to the circus to produce a series of multimedia concerts called the Electric Ear, produced by Thais Latham, who was quite a powerhouse in those days in New York City. We did many, many, many wonderful performances there, put on shows by lots of very important composers and multimedia artists. I remember we had a button, an Electric Ear button. It was orange, and it had a slogan on it that Pauline Oliveros came up with. It simply said, "This here's the Electric Ear." Well, that was a wonderful time. Mort made it possible for me to use the Buchla system that was there. We also had one at the Electric Circus. And I think at Bleecker Street, we had a couple of Ampex 4-track tape recorders. So multi-track facilities were not very common then. And here was one that I had access to, and that was really fantastic. That helped me make a lot of work. I continued to produce some events at the Electric Circus after that. And then I moved to Toronto to help start the music department at York University. But I came back to New York often, and in particular to work with Thais Latham again on a new series of multimedia events that took place at Automation House. Overlapping with the Electric Ear series at the Electric Circus, we created a kind of touring group, an Electric Ear touring group. And there were run-out concerts that we did in different combinations, different groups of people, different sets of shows. Thank you.
And so there were a lot of spirited people who coursed through the studio, and
I'll try to rush through it here. When I first got there in 66, people, as I said, started coming in. Ultraviolet was actually, she was a part of the one of the actresses for
Andy Warhol.
Pardon? Andy Warhol's group. And she was there the night of the commission from Silver Apples of the Moon. But other people came, Charlemagne Palestine, Ingram Marshall, and one day they came just to work in the studio. When I got to, I mentioned I was earning $2,200 for teaching when I came there, plus what I was making on my own. Altogether, I earned close to $5,000 in San Francisco. But when I arrived in New York, I was making $5,000 from NYU and $5,000 from Lincoln Center, and I felt that I was going to go to hell because I was earning so much money. I felt really guilty. So almost the first thing I did was go to the 3rd Street Music Settlement and volunteer Saturdays to teach poor kids. And they brought, first half of the day on Saturday, they brought a group of people from reform schools with 2 guards with guns. One stayed with them in the bus while he brought one up. And in the afternoon, I offered to do 4 weeks of teaching to a class, both for the reform school kids, and then this group that they would put together of poor kids from 3rd Street Music Settlement. One of them was, let me go to the next slide there, was Reese Chatham. He was 16 years old, and not in this picture. But there's a documentary being made on me right now, and I was in Paris, and a couple of months ago, and we had 2 days where they're all living in Paris, Serge and Reese, and it happened that
there's Serge.
That Charlemagne was also in Paris doing a performance. So we all had 2 days together, which was really wonderful. And Reese told the story of coming to those 4 sessions and having his life literally be changed. And I won't go into it, but it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. He was telling me, I didn't know what he was going through, but I found out. And then he came up to me at the end of the 4, and he said, he was telling the camera, he said, and then I came up to Mr. Subotnick, and I said, these are wonderful. This was wonderful 4 sessions. Is there any chance I could study with you? And he said, Mr. Subotnick said, well, we'll see what we can do, which is something I would never have said. I would have said, sure. And there he came, and he studied with me. So that was Reese. And then there's Serge. Serge came, as David was saying, he came to see me because he wanted to start making electronics, and could he work for me? Could he do electronics? So I said, sure. That was what I said for everything, so I'm sure. And so he did. He started trying things out. He said, well, what can I make? And then I'd say, well, try a ring modulator. And I showed him that, and he made a ring modulator and so forth. He was living with Marianne Amershey at the time. And his father, Serge's father, was a famous Alexander Cherubin was a famous, he probably still is famous, but he was very famous at that point as a composer of piano music and had an apartment in New York. So when his father was in town, Serge needed a place to stay, and so I gave them, there was a closet, big closet. It wasn't a little closet, but it had no windows. And he and Marianne lived in that closet at the studio. And, well, it was quite a time, and we had a wonderful time. Charlemagne was always, he didn't look this way, but in those days, but the attitude was there from the beginning, always. We'll come to this in just a second. One thing I wanted to tie together with the Silver Apples is that Silver Apples came out in the fall of '67, and the Electric Circus opened, I think in the late spring of '67. I was working on Silver Apples of the Moon. I also, in January '67, I had a performance with Ann Halpern, Parades and Changes at Hunter College, and so hard to get this fast. And I used the material I had for the Parades and Changes was a lot of it came from the material I was making for Silver Apples of the Moon. And when we got to the opening of the Electric Circus, I was working on the second side of Silver Apples of the Moon, which had the heavy pulse going. And so at that point in time, I had maybe 20 minutes of that pulsing music. It eventually became like 6 or 7 minutes, but on the record. But I had a whole bunch of it that I had made, and so for the opening night of and we don't have a picture of that, of the opening night of Electric Circus, but they were packed with famous people: Seiji Ozawa, the Kennedys, everybody and everyone was there in tuxedo. Was that no? That wasn't.
No, it's the same one from before.
There is a picture that shows them all standing in line outside to get in. There were about at least 100% overcrowded with people in there. And we began the evening with when the lights came down, I had Buchla had made subwoofers, huge subwoofers attached to the floor of the Electric Circus. So you literally vibrated with the beat. I mean, it was like the whole place actually vibrated. And so I started with these very heavy, low sounds at approximately, one every second. So it would be like a heartbeat, and it went boom, boom, boom. But you didn't actually hear it as much as felt it. And gradually, the music for Silver Apples side 2 starts to come, and the rhythm starts going. And lo and behold, and strobe lights began, and Tony did things, and people danced. People were all dancing to Silver Apples of the Moon. It was a really shock to my system, but it was interesting. Anyway, so that sort of ties Silver Apples into this whole thing. And so to finish this, Bob Corrigan, I'm giving you an ABA here. Bob Corrigan was within 3 years of Tisch, around the time we're talking about with Tony, around 1960, the 68, 69 academic year or season, Bob Corrigan was approached by the Disney family to start, to be the first dean to start Cal Arts. And because...
Why don't we actually, if Lori could join us at this point.
Well, that's the year after.
Okay.
For Lori, you mean?
Okay, I thought you were leading to
I'm
that.
ending.
I see.
I'm ending this. We can come on up here, but I'm ending this. I'm closing
Okay.
off. So Herb was asked to go out and be the provost with Bob, and Bob, who had just they wanted me to be dean of the music school, and I said to Herb, I said, if you're going to take your friends to be deans, you're in real trouble. I said, I can't do that. I don't want to go. I really like it here. But by May, they got Mel Powell to become dean. Mel wanted me to be associate dean in music, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go, and I didn't want to go. And he kept calling, and he said, "This is my last call." There were about 6 months of calls, and the last call in May of 1969, I opened my mouth to say no and said yes, and left. And I took with me Serge, Charlemagne Palestine, Ingram Marshall, and went to start the California Institute of the Arts. The studio actually continued. I lost one person, my assistant in the studio from the beginning, because I had to give lectures once a week to the student body, and I didn't want to grade papers. So they gave me Michael Tchaikovsky as a graduate student, and he stayed on with the studio.